This is DGMT's Learning Lunch, and I'm your host, Rahima Esop. In many low-income communities across South Africa, early learning programs like creches are predominantly run by women who are not formally registered to receive funding from the state because of an onerous and complicated application process. So, these creche owners are reliant on fees to pay their staff and earn a living. As micro-enterprises, they have high administrative loads, struggle to access age-appropriate books in different languages, and don't always have a way of connecting with support networks that would help them to navigate the state's registration process. These issues were among the primary problems that ECD Connect set out to solve with the help of behavioural scientists, extensive interviews with ECD practitioners and experts. But the project has evolved into so much more and can now best be described as a suite of apps that serve the needs of a broad community of people in early childhood development, from community health and nutrition to early education. Joining me today to discuss the evolution of ECD Connect, its social purpose and what it took to develop an app for civil society is Peter Skitter, project lead of ECD Connect. Welcome, Peter. It's nice to have you. Your first time on this podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rahima. It's great to be here.
Peter, take me back to where it all began. Where did the idea for making a free app for ECD owners and practitioners come from?
In society generally, there was this realization that ECD development and that time in a child's life is critical to future outcomes. And so this project was set up to basically try and support growth in that space. So South Africa doesn't have enough ECD centers and practitioners, and we can't get them quick enough to fulfill the need. And so this project is trying to facilitate greater access to ECD for South African children.
How does it do that?
So in terms of running an ECD center, there are various critical parts that need to be in place. Obviously, we can't do much about the venue, but in terms of the rhythms of the day, so what children are doing, what sort of material should be covered, how do you keep track of things in your ECD center? These are things that the ECD Connect app can help with, help you keep track of the important things. And then in time, the vision is that you would be able to make better decisions because you're keeping track of all these important things.
So that makes sense. The focus is on supporting the practitioners and the ECD owners to focus on the early learning part of running a creche rather than the heavy administrative load and the other factors that one needs to take into consideration when running a micro-enterprise. From concept to research to the first product development stage, tell me about the work that went into making ECD Connect.
Yeah, I think this is probably some of the most exciting stuff about the project. So what is noticeable with this project is how much it's informed by on-the-ground research and also a design-centered approach. So I think everybody thinks tech, there's a tech solution for everything, but sometimes things are built without really understanding the user. And so a lot of time was spent in the field speaking to practitioners and understanding their needs. Design-based thinking kind of puts the empathy and the understanding of the user at the center. And so I think this has been done really well on this project. And so from those discussions, from that research, then prototypes were built and things were tested. And ultimately that iteration cycle of conversation and testing happened over time to the point where we got something that we could release into the market or the space. And that evolution continues to this day. As we get users on the platform, we're reflecting, refining, and trying to better meet the needs.
I think it would be helpful to run us through the actual timeline with regards to the evolution of ECD Connect.
So the project itself started in 2020, but obviously, as everyone remembers, it was an interesting time in the world. And so a lot of the initial research was then pushed sort of into 2021, and then building sort of started in 2022-ish. I wasn't at the helm at that time, and so these are kind of approximations. And then the building really kind of got going 23 and 24 we launched into the world in terms of its, a bigger scale.
I mentioned in my introduction that the ECD Connect developers worked with behavioural scientists and did extensive interviews with ECD practitioners and experts. That helped to better understand what the problems were on the ground. So how can ECD Connect help then the average overburdened creche owner and practitioner?
So the biggest thing that comes through based on the research is ease of use and not trying to do too many things, but rather do a few things well. It's almost like there's a cognitive load, and if you don't want to get above that load, because then essentially like the goal where you end up isn't a great place. And so the biggest thing that I notice sometimes when I explain this to practitioners, I talk about the Capitec app in the way in that it's simple and does a few things well. And that's essentially like, what are the most important things that you need to run a practical, efficient ECD center? And the app tries to do those things and help you capture that information and then returns it to you when you need it to make better decisions. The way I do it in training sessions is I say, ECD Connect measures the important stuff or helps you measure the important stuff, keep track of it, so that you can then make better decisions.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so the most basic thing that you need to keep track of are, if you're an owner, your practitioners or your employees, and then you need to keep track of the students or the children in your ECD center. You need to then keep track of, how often they're at the ECD center. You need to keep track of what are they doing when they're at the ECD center. And, if you want to get to quality, you want to start recording observations about the people in your ECD center and thinking about, what can I do to assist and improve outcomes. In terms of it's helpful to explain there are a bunch of modules in the ECD Connect app. The first one is Classroom, and it's focused on kind of helping you keep track of the important information in the classroom. Then there's a business module, which helps you keep track of things like income and expenses. You can capture them, it will store it, and then you can retrieve it when you need to provide evidence of what you've been spending on. You can keep track of the leave that your practitioners take. You can add practitioners to your ECD center. And then there's a module called Community, where we try to allow practitioners to interact, talk to each other, form communities of practice. And then the final module is the training module, which the idea is to allow upskilling over time. So I think those are the four main areas where we're trying to help.
I want to better understand the app. I believe there are 3 versions. Tell me about each version.
So it's also helpful to understand the ECD Connect platform. So I'll say that it is a platform of apps, or it's potentially a platform. At the moment, we're very much focusing on what we call ECD Connect Open Access and ECD Connect White Label. And then the third part is there is an open source project where we will be open sourcing the code base of the app, so that if other organizations in other countries or organizations with advanced technical capability, they can then take and customize the app in whatever way they want. But the reality is most organizations don't have those resources. And so the open access version of ECD Connect is available for free to the public, and it's very low friction to get going. So you simply need a link. If you are setting up an ECD center, you get that link, you start playing around, and you've got free software that's high quality that can help you on your journey and even advise you in the process of setting up your own ECD center. And this is really one of the key things of the project. We don't have enough ECD centers. How do we get capacity? Well, we reduce the amount of resources you need to get going and to create quality. And for the ones that exist, we want to allow them to reach a high quality standard. But we need modeled routines of quality to make their way into those networks. So that's the open access version. In the space, there are many registered training organizations, and so often they have a certain umbrella over ECD centers, and they want information on their network. They want to play a role in managing that network and supporting. And so there's the white label version has extra features in terms of a coaching layer, like an oversight layer, a dashboard, a content portal where content specific to that network can be loaded, and just basically support these networks as they grow, and we can play our part there.
Is the white label version currently free?
It is not. There is a charge for the white label version or a license fee. And the purpose behind that is there are value-added services that are included on the white label version, where there's a content portal, there is network statistics, there's a coaching layer for field agents, and there are various onboarding costs and things like that that they need to be covered in that space. We also suggest to our white label partners that a budget for reverse billing of data is included, because ultimately in the part of the ecosystem that we're aiming at, there essentially isn't money for data. And so if you don't incorporate a budget for reverse billing of data, you're building something for people who don't have the means to access it. And so that should be incorporated into the plan. So we charge a license fee, and then we advise setting up reverse billing.
The white label is primarily for resource and training organizations that have a number of creches that fall within their scope of work, and they provide support services to these organizations.
Exactly, yeah. So they'll train, some of the smaller ones might have 45 ECD centers, some of the bigger ones might have 200, 300, even larger. So this is fairly common, and it's a way of trying to support ECD centers and share information efficiently. They'll provide support in different ways depending on where they are in the country, but generally it's around running a center, sustainability, sometimes it's content support. There are many layers, but essentially they're trying to achieve the same goal that I spoke about earlier in the podcast around increasing the quantity of ECD centers and then ultimately the quality. And they often have their own training programs too.
I believe that ECD Connect has also created tailored, bespoke apps for Smart Start as well as the Grow Great Champions program. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the kind of conceptualization, the idea was that the code bases on which these apps are built can be repurposed and reused in different ways. And depending on the organization's needs, the flexibility kind of can be adjusted. So in the case of Smart Start, they were actually the first app that we released, and it was, we say, a separate fork of the code base, and then that fork of the code base was then developed and taken over and handed over to Smart Start. And so it's very similar to ECD Connect, but it has certain customizations for the Smart Start model. And so that's sort of one offshoot of the ECD Connect project, and that rests with Smart Start. And then quite an exciting project, but a little bit different to what we've discussed so far, is Grow Great's Community Health Worker app, which again took the code base and then customized it for the community health worker needs. And a lot of costs were saved that way. And that's ultimately the vision, that you have this code base. Instead of starting from scratch, you can adapt it and ultimately, further down the line, potentially integrate data, because, this is all the ECD development space. Obviously, nutrition and quality of learning are related.
Is that what you were alluding to when you spoke about organizations being able to use the open source information to create something that meets their needs?
Yes. So the open source code is essentially the logic and the programming that makes the app work. But there are different needs, in the space. And so if you have the ability to host the code base on a virtual server, if you have developers that can customize the app, if you have content that you want to put on, then yes, absolutely. But one of the reasons why ECD Connect is so useful is that the cost of those skills is very high. And so in general, the white label version is often that middle ground where we're still taking care of most of the technical layers, but we're trying to give you a bit more flexibility for your network. The open source code base essentially is the highest level of freedom, but the highest level of cost as well.
So who collects and accesses and owns the data across each version of the app that we've spoken about?
Yes. So in terms of, Smart Start, the example that I gave earlier, Smart Start has their own database in which the data is captured, and essentially they have the rights to that data. Obviously, when users join the platform, there are various things that have to be signed and acknowledged. the way that the data is treated is that the intention is that it's used for policy down the line, but the way data is shared is anonymized. And so the data rests with the organization, the same with GrowGreat, the data rests under their control. And in the case of ECD Connect, we are still registered under DGMT, and so it rests with DGMT. And an important part of the project is building trust, because we are acting as custodians of that data, and it's an immensely powerful, potentially powerful space to analyze and refine policy, but we have to always be clear about building trust with the users. If we don't build that trust, we won't be able to accumulate that data over time. And so I think about that a lot, like what can we do to make sure that we keep that trust?
You spoke about the GrowGreat version of the ECD Connect app as an exciting venture.
Yeah.
How does that fit into the vision of ECD Connect, a focus on community health workers? How does that fit into the overall vision of ECD Connect? It feels like you're going in different directions.
The common thread there is DGMT. So GrowGreat is an independent organization who we are providing services to, and we have this technical competence that we've built up. And so it's a collaboration of sorts. Their independence in terms of who goes out to the field, who manages the community health workers, that's GrowGreat's space, and they're taking more and more ownership. But for this time, it's still the technical skills and level of our team supporting that app as it goes out. So it is different in the sense of the core focus of, let's say, ECD centers and preschools, but we all know that nutrition is an important part of that experience. And so we're trying to collaborate in a way that supports our goals, and potentially there could be other collaborations down the line which may become important. And that's the sort of open-ended vision of the platform, in that it can be repurposed for useful things, and those useful things will emerge over time as more data comes in.
Because there are different inputs that young children need for them to be able to thrive by the time they reach the age of 5, and nutrition, early learning are just two components of what is essentially called the essential package for early childhood development. I want to change tack now and talk about some of the challenges and some of the risks involved in developing an app of this magnitude and of this nature. So we know that mobile apps are ubiquitous in our modern day lives, serving sometimes frivolous functions and other times really crucial ones like your banking app. You mentioned the Capitec app as an example. But we know that app development is very expensive, and we know that it is time-consuming and riddled with unpredictable problems. Often we hear the term bugs being thrown around, which is probably why few civil society organizations have invested in apps. With this in mind, my reading is that ECD Connect is not only providing a product to the sector, but also a service by absorbing all of that risk that comes with app development and making it free for the sector. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's well spotted. It is a technically difficult exercise. It's an expensive exercise, and the benefits are potentially massive, but the risks are also high too. And so I think this is where DGMT has the ability, because of its resource base and its commitment to difficult problems, but with potentially high rewards, is the perfect organization to hold that space. And we're trying to pull that risk, take it on, and then partner with organizations who can then do the next step in the journey. And that's a critical part of what we're trying to do, and it's probably the most useful part of what we're doing.
And probably for context that I should mention now, which I didn't mention in the beginning, is that ECD Connect is a pivotal project of the DG Murray Trust, and that's why you mentioning DGMT in your responses. There have been some great wins so far. In 2024, ECD Connect won an award that must have been a great boost in terms of morale and for keeping donors on side. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the award it's always good to get recognition of the work that's being done, and a lot of software development is done kind of in quiet, and then it emerges. So to be recognized was great. In terms of the things that funders and energy on the team really benefit from are seeing the usage numbers go up and seeing how we are kind of interacting with the real world. Also, the training sessions. When you go out and do training sessions and you see the users who you're building it for and you realize that it's helping and that they're doing this great work of being, teachers at the front line, that's quite a motivating experience for the team. And often we will reflect at our weekly meeting about some of the trips into the field. We did a trip to the Northwest this current week, and I think that's really, the team's energy really surges on the back of that, the reality that we're helping.
The trip that you spoke about to the Northwest this week is part of a road show to promote the open access version of the app. What has been the response so far? What are you hearing?
On the ground, when we introduce the app, it's very positive. The biggest thing that people pick up is the simplicity and ease of use, which, if you think back to the design principles I was talking about earlier, that feels fantastic because you feel like we conceptualized this is how it's being received. At the moment, we focus on just introducing the app and almost trying to create a bit of FOMO, a bit of kind of, we want you to come back and explore further. The next level of training is obviously really getting people to trust the ecosystem, get on board, make it part of their day-to-day life. But the early impressions are really positive and some great questions. It's been a really encouraging time.
Have you experienced any reluctance from ECD practitioners to the app, and why?
So in terms of the training sessions and the questions and the engagement, it's very, very positive. What you do see after sign up, and we've actually phoned users and done research on this, is that data access is a big problem. So often in the training sessions, we provide the Wi-Fi, so it's a very stable environment. But as time goes by, the reality is that even though the app is designed to work offline, which it does, and then sync after up to 30 days, the access to the internet to use the app is still a barrier. And so that's one of the main barriers. And then the other barrier that we do observe is that sometimes digital literacy, even though it's been designed in a way that's very user-friendly, we still find that people are uncomfortable sometimes with technology and need some sort of extra training to just feel comfortable with ideas like passwords, typing on a especially for people with maybe who are getting older, the dexterity of typing on a cell phone can sometimes be challenging. I've seen this in sessions, and so there needs to be support structures to help get over that initial learning curve.
Data is always a barrier, and it's one of the reasons why DGMT has long been lobbying for zero rating, and I can assume that zero rating will be a game changer for ECD Connect and the people using the app.
Yes, so zero rating is really, really important for this project because it opens the line to reach people independent of how much they make, how much money they make. So we are trying to put in place an interim solution of reverse billing, paying for the data for the users on the app. But obviously this costs a lot of money, and the idea and the hope is that the government will assist in zero rating for this project. And for me, if I think about the future benefits of quality early childhood development, if not this project, then which project? It feels to me like part of my role has got to be to advocate for this and to say, look, once we can bring the data, we can show you the training, results that we've done in the field, but ultimately government and civil society needs to help get that last layer open. So I feel very passionate about that, and I think, we're going to try hard.
Absolutely. And talking about civil society and its role, what would you like civil society organizations to know about ECD Connect and how it can benefit them in particular?
So in this rollout phase that we're currently in, I think initially it's actually to sort of spread the word of the availability of the app. So when we've been rolling it out, we've been on the cautious side because we want to keep on learning as we do it and get feedback. But at the same time, it takes quite a long time for knowledge to spread into, the corners of South Africa. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is awareness through civil society, the fact that this app exists. It's only recently been released.
As open access.
Yes, as open access. And so I think awareness is step one that civil society can help us with. I think also that recommendations in your network, in terms of if you see an ECD center that you're supporting and you want them to begin that transition to recording more of the important stuff in their center, then supporting them in that initial step of finding us. We also have a WhatsApp line that we provide for user support. We have a YouTube channel. So just sharing those resources out into the public's awareness would be super helpful. And yeah, that would be the primary thing that comes to mind.
That wraps up today's conversation. Thank you, Peter. ECD Connect can be used by independent, standalone practitioners and principals, or by civil society organizations working in early childhood development. It can help in scaling programs to achieve government's goal of universal access to ECD by 2030, crossing fingers. I'm eagerly watching to see what's next for you and your team. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Rahima.
And now, over to you, those listening to this podcast. Using what you have heard today, you can try this reflective exercise. You'll need a pen and paper to write down these steps, or download the takeaway sheet from our website, dgmt.co.za, and go to the podcast section. Write down the following questions and spend some time reflecting on them by yourself, and then share your reflections with your colleagues. Question number 1. In your opinion, what determines the quality of an early learning program, like a creche? And question number 2. If you or your organization had an app for the work that you do in your sector, what 4 priorities would you have for the app? This might help you to find solutions to problems that you are currently facing. This is DGMT's Learning Lunch. Until next time.